And in the words of Paul, and we are live. Welcome, everyone. Special welcome to you, Julia, while you're still in transit. I hope you're traveling safely. Well, I'm going to start, and those who will join us live, that's fine. And Shanaz has joined us. Hello, Shanaz. And today we're going to continue with our theme around um, our engagement leading a joyful life. And, our theme, our tagline theme is Wish I Was Here. And so today we are going to continue um, with our 26th principle found in the list of unconventional wisdom for a joyful life. And this one is interesting. It sounds kind of practical. And so let's hope that we can add some value to this topic. As usual, I hope it, I don't think it's controversial, but I hope it stirs something within each one of us. So, our principle today is pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. So, I'll say it again, pain is inevitable, and suffering is optional. And what we know and what this says is that because we are alive, because we are pursuing a purpose, fulfilling a purpose, pursuing goals, whatever those might be, whether it's short term, medium term, long term, in relationships, in situations, whether there's chaos, whether there's war, whether there's peace, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And what exactly do we mean by this? So, the context, once again, I'll set it for you because this principle is tied to this particular principle here that says the only way to know love is to experience what love is not, even for a brief moment. So, while human drama includes pain, we have a choice of how to view it. So, it takes the view that sometimes to appreciate a value, a principle. The opposite leads us to that place. And when we explore the current beliefs around pain and suffering, is that remember, we said pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Current beliefs would stipulate that people may believe that suffering, though, is either inevitable or it is deserved, or sometimes it's even required. So exactly, how is this belief taught? Where is it taught? I mean, why is it true? What research supports this belief that suffering is inevitable? And I have to ask the question: is there any benefit in believing the contrary? That suffering is optional. And we'll talk a little bit about the next part that where we say suffering is optional. For example, an aging person may feel like a victim to this question of pain and suffering, believing that suffering with pain and sickness is part and parcel of getting old. And that leads to too old to get a new job, too old to find a new relationship, too old to make new friends, too old to try a new hobby, and also too old and therefore not healthy enough to travel and enjoy the next part of their journey. So if pain is inevitable, and we are and this principle is saying suffering is optional, it's certainly part and parcel of how we view pain. We experience the pain, but how we process that pain is up to us. because of it's we have the choice of how we view it. Now, the quote that normally accompanies this principle says, in order to know the light, we must experience the darkness, by June. And I must say, I find that very, very interesting, maybe even more challenging, that one's appreciation for what is liberating, functional, constructive, anabolic, is that we need to know what is destruction and destructive, and that which limits and destroys, in order for us to appreciate the converse. So if we continue with thinking and staying with an example about ageism and age, for example, I have to ask these questions. So I guess what I'm going to ask you. I'll ask myself the question. It's like, the first question is like, what was my view of seniors? When we speak about people with a real maturity of life and wisdom in terms of age. So normally, I don't know these days, just to give further context to the conversation and the example, we're talking about the people at retirement age. I think it's better to say. So literally, on average, we talk about, well, not average, but let's say the maximum retirement age is around about 65. Let's talk about that, when all productive life and careers are sort of coming to an end. So what do you think, or sorry, what did I think of people who were 65 years old when I was growing up? Well, I must say, I thought of 30 years old, 30-year-old as old, believe it or not, 35 years old as old. And my concept was, well, they're not as vigorous as they used to be. And certainly you could see the the decline in physicality and so forth. And normally, um, in my own estimation, you see strands of gray beginning to develop, and so white hair, from my perspective as a young person growing up, is a sign of decay. I did a bit of research. It's like the hair that turns white, is that not perhaps hair that is showing some form of decay? Death is coming closer and closer, and therefore the physical prowess of a person 65 years old, not so great. And however, it's amazing how your perspective changes when you start getting to that age, and how you feel and how you look at yourself. When you look at yourself in a mirror, do you see that age? And I must say, my view of how I saw people at that age colored certainly what I thought about age. Um, and this is the association of somebody who's 65 plus is rheumatism, arthritis, health problems, in pain, bent over, walking with the assistance of a cane and so forth. And that colored my perception. And there were fleeting moments when I thought about age as 65, I thought, how do I guarantee a quality of life because of a belief that was really building? And the closer I get to that age, the more I begin to understand how limiting that belief is that you don't have to suffer the same thing. Interestingly enough, I thought once I get into my 40s, early 50s, I'll lose all my teeth, because that was my experience. I'll be wearing false teeth. Don't know. I don't even think we call them that, those dentures, false teeth, but that's what we called them when we were growing up. I must say, other questions around this, and I'm not going to even attempt to answer them. And I really want to throw this discussion wide open, is the association of how I saw other people with illnesses growing up, um, what did it stir within me? What did it stir within you? What was that impression? Something that caught my eye while thinking about this is that growing old starts with thinking you are growing old. So it gave me hope. Can I encourage you? Can you see yourself as ageless? Can you see yourself as a beautiful spiritual being? Everyone has a unique gift to share with the world, no matter the physical age of their bodies or the quality of their health. We can choose to grow whether we are 19 or 91. So, despite what we go through, whether it's physical, emotional, mental pain, we can choose to suffer for it. And what this principle is challenging us is that we still remain productive, we still remain of value, whether you're sitting in a wheelchair on crutches or flat on your back as a quadriplegic, you still have value. Your life hasn't come to an end. You don't need to see the physical nature, mental, psychological nature of your condition as limiting, as suffering. And therefore, the moment we are suffering, our focus turns to just the process of suffering. And our view begins to contract to such a point that all we can think about is to get rid of the pain, do something at the pain, and it becomes something that dominates our thoughts. So, if we accept, therefore, that pain is inevitable, we won't allow our thinking that it is suffering to stop us from still fulfilling our purpose. So, I see there's a comment over here. Oh, my timing is always off when I read these comments. Anyway, so I don't even know what you were responding to there. So anyway, um, uh, Renee, I know hasn't joined us today. So Shanaz, kind of a let's say um, different principle to discuss, and I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Hi, Jacques. I actually found it very interesting because I'm busy with a new module, teaching a new module. It's on youth studies, and I was discussing with the students that where do we get our knowledge about age, from, and who decided that young we stop like young people is up till the age of 35, and we kind of started to exploring that, and I think that I guess it's a very, I think it's sometimes a Western concept that we have adopted, because when we do look spiritually, biblically, as well as within African wisdom, we see that there is this idea of agelessness, and that the elderly are revered and still very active. They play a very active role, and so I realized how much of my views on aging, and as I'm in that kind of process and often have to deal with it as a female, I find it's really been influenced by the media, and definitely by ideas of the West, and maybe watching, as I grew up watching too much TV, that as you get old, you don't take part, you don't see the same actors and actresses, so obviously they don't have a job. So growing old is, I've associated with very negative um um perceptions. I have negative, and I've had to really work on that for myself, um and also particularly in our community,
Mhm.
where it does seem to be that once you are 60, you should sit at home on your stoop in the garden and not do anything, because that's how I saw elderly people in the communities I lived in and worked in. Yeah.
Yeah, very very interesting. So uh, the 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 view we have and the expectation you have, if you wish somebody a long life, I have a habit of saying to people when they hit 50, I said, well, you know, you've reached your half time. the new halftime. You know, previously 35 was deemed to be middle aged, but I would say, just in my own estimation, I think 50 is, and I still believe it. 50 is such a magical figure because the promise of reaching 100. So when so when I say, well, look forward to the next 50, the responses I normally get is like, I don't want to live that long. And when I just dig a little bit into that, it is the quality of life that deteriorates so fast, associated with as you get older, that we want to cut our, we don't want to live with that pain, um, and so the general belief that I don't know what that is now, Shanaz, and you do the research from a real academic point of view, but I don't know if we consider people between the ages of 65, 75, 80, 90, still to be vigorous. Let's agree that everyone has a purpose until their last breath, that they can be of use. The point here that we're touching on is how we think about living a life extended beyond. I mean, can you imagine living over 120 years? I don't know what the latest is, and as far as the oldest person on the planet, but it is that fear of living longer but not actually having the quality of life to enjoy that life, because the we bracing ourselves with the suffering associated with the ailments of the aged, if you like. And then it begins, and then it begins to touch on how we view our purpose and how that shrinks us into that place. And if you think and as you grow older, as your body changes physically and so forth, and specifically maybe in a case where you begin to really retire, I mean, I use that retirement age of 65, but if you really retire and so forth, your mindset can limit your view to such an extent that all you're doing is enduring the suffering rather than persevering with the fulfillment of your purpose and adding value. So I wonder, if I throw a slight curveball, in the path of my own thinking here, is this not how, when we get older and we become disappointed with the physical changes that we go through and the pain, etc., that we become to see ourselves as of less value because of the suffering we're going through and the need that we need to address the suffering, that the particular journey. I mean, you don't need to be of a certain age. You don't be old to be going through pain, and here we're talking specifically physical pain. But I mean, in today's context, Shanaz, and this is once again your area of expertise, and we can experience pain psychologically, very much so, and that could lead to suffering at another level, I guess. But when we're in that place, is to continually embrace the fact that we are of value, that we can still grow, that we can still learn new things. And I wonder if that is not the case, and I'm sure it's one of our. I do know one of the principles of unconventional wisdom talks about like energy attracting like energy, meaning who we are, how we resonate in the way we think. And I'm wondering, is society, um, especially Western society, not appreciating people at a certain age because they've got so much to offer, but isn't it because The people that have got so much to offer are beginning to think they don't have anything else to offer, and they're just waiting to depart from this earth. And um, yeah, so yeah, I wonder if irrespective now of age and how we are experiencing life, we either attract the people who see value in us when we know we still add value at any age. I wonder how powerful that would be, that despite our circumstances, sometimes we're experiencing in relationships pain, separation, whatever brings pain in a relationship. And immediately we begin to feel inadequate. We will not help, support, encourage others around us because we feel we failed. Pain has brought to us the opportunity at a crossroads to keep on powering on and be relevant, functionally relevant, and purposeful in how we live our lives? Or do we feel, well, I no longer qualify because of my suffering? Because, the words pain and suffering, the one is fact and inescapable, the other one is a choice. The suffering is is not allowing the suffering to diminish our lives, make us concentrate on everything less. So what do you think, just to step broadly out of the age specific example, what do you think about this principle in terms of suffering is optional? Do you think it's true that suffering is optional?
I, if you're asking me, I do think it's I do think it's true. I think that it's very much. I really believe it's our perception of the experience, and I always think that we talk about, we co-create our environment and our reality,
Hmm.
and in that way, I think when we perceive something as suffering, or we are going to suffer, I think that we start to back away, and we don't want that. We suppress it. We try all sorts of things to kind of get out of it. And yet, pain is inevitable. Life is, we will experience pain in life. So yeah, I agree that, I think that it's our perception, of, yeah, of experiences, that can determine how we, yeah, whether we're able to kind of manage that, pain or not. So yeah, hope that makes sense.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, what you're saying there just makes me think around that perception, that anticipation of for the suffering associated with it. You know, a pastor of mine, my current senior pastor, wrote a book on saying, and he's the title of his book was "Pain is Inevitable, but Misery is Optional." And when we anticipate pain and the associated misery of that place we're going to find ourselves in, we tend to want to avoid it. I mean, that's so. We get to a place where we need to make a decision and step into um, that place of anticipation, of anticipated pain, willfully. I mean, I'm not talking about willfully because we've had one experience. You know the adage where once bitten, and I mean it's only once bitten, twice shy, kind of a thing. Um, so if you've experienced pain when you made choices and things didn't turn out so well, and you attracted all kinds of things, do you live a life limited? It's like um, stepping out of the house, getting into your motor vehicle, driving to a place, you're involved in a horrific accident. Does that mean that forever and a day you will never ever drive a car ever again because of that experience. And um, you know, this reminder that we keep going despite the circumstances, you know, despite the it's easy. I think, and you sound to me, Shanaz, as something that somebody that's highly inspired. You inspire yourself, you're inspired by what you do, so you motivational. I don't know, when you try and motivate people when they're going through things like this, and even in your practice, I wonder if you sometimes get people looking at you and saying, yeah, everything is going well for you, what do you really understand of my situation? I don't know if you ever had that experience.
Um, yes, I do. And I think that, I think what I try to do is, I kind of show the, I was gonna say, like, I empathize with them, and I try to acknowledge how they're feeling, but I think that I've also accepted that, it's a process to get inspired, and in terms of to change your perception. And I have this exercise that I do with him around perceptions. So, yeah, but it's like I don't try not to get frustrated when when someone is like constantly, yeah, seeing one side of things and struggling to see, other options.
But in your case now, is have you ever been accused, and I use that word in inverted commas, of, yeah, it's easy for you to say, it's easy for you to see, maybe even the silver lining, it's easy for you to deal with these kinds of perceptions. If only you walked in my shoes, just so that and as you say, rather than to sympathize, is to empathize with them, and show that you can understand. But I'm just curious, if you
Yes,
ever.
yes, yes. There has been someone that has said that to me. Yeah.
It's like as if it's just, this is so, this is what actually happened, and therefore my perception of what actually happened, which turns into that way of thinking of it as suffering, or I'm living a miserable existence because I have pain, in physical pain, mental pain, whatever it might be. Therefore, my life is so miserable. Is to push through uh, that thought, that view of life, that despite all of that, you are valuable. Is I mean, I sometimes, I know when you're sitting on that roller coaster of life, where you do go down into the downward spiral, then it's maybe not so easy to say, but just flow with life, go with it like a river, be in the flow of life, don't fight it as much. But the curiosity that, circumstances, pain as a result of those circumstances, is inevitable. You can kind of depend on it, that it's going to happen. Is that determination, that despite your perception. So what we're going to do is we're going to acknowledge that we have perceptions around these things. But I suppose, I just want to end off by saying, if we can resolve, to anyone else listening to this podcast, resolve and be determined that despite the pain, do not be miserable. Do not see it as suffering. Do not see it that you earned the suffering, that you have to suffer because you've done something and therefore you need to. No, live a life of purpose. See that there is still gain, by you touching those around you in whatever way. Leave your mark. Continue to leave your mark, no matter what. So yeah, those are my concluding thoughts. Shanaz, what are yours?
Yes, I would kind of agree with you. I think that I would go with the same view, and I would kind of sometimes I read this thing that says to be able to sit with another person's pain and grief without needing to force them to kind of change, and sometimes I think maybe we just need someone to sit with us in that moment, and that um, can propel one forward to being inspired again and finding your purpose.
Mm,
So, yeah. So maybe
nah,
find someone who will
yes,
just sit with you briefly in that suffering and in that pain.
yeah, I agree. Well, on that note, thanks, Shanaz. Thanks for sharing as usual. And thank you, Julia. Thank you to those that have listened. And until next week, speak to you then. Bye for
Thank you,
now.
Janelle. Bye. Bye.